My name is Decanus Kirillvos, and I have been entombed within the corpse of the inexorable verdict for what I estimate to be 147 standard Terran days. I say estimate because time has become an abstract concept here in the dark, a theoretical measurement that bears little resemblance to the lived experience of waiting for death in absolute silence. The chronometer embedded in my left vambrace ceased functioning on the 73rd day, its machine spirit abandoning me just as the God Emperor has. Or perhaps I am being tested. Perhaps this is purgatory, and I have not yet proven myself worthy of the Emperor's release. The ship died screaming. I remember that much with perfect clarity. The way the verdict's hull groaned as we broke atmosphere over Talern Secundus, the terrible metallic shrieking as structural supports buckled and gave way, the roar of fire as plasma conduits ruptured throughout the vessel's lower decks. I remember the moment of impact, the bone-crushing deceleration that turned my body into a ragdoll despite the restraint harness, the way my teeth cracked together and my vision went white with pain. Then silence. Not the peaceful silence of a cathedral at midnight, but the oppressive, suffocating silence of a tomb. The emergency lumens failed within the first hour, plunging my section of the ship into darkness so complete that I cannot see my own hands even when I press them against my face. The air recyclers stuttered to a halt on the second day, leaving me to breathe the stale, unchanging atmosphere that now carries the faint copper taste of blood and the acrid bite of burned circuitry. I am sealed in what was once the tertiary command station, a reinforced compartment 3 decks below the bridge, designed to serve as a backup command center should the primary station be compromised. The irony is not lost on me. This sanctuary has become my prison, its armored bulkheads now impenetrable barriers between myself and salvation. The blast doors sealed automatically when the ship's cogitators detected hull breaches in the surrounding sections. A logical response. A necessary response. The machine spirits followed their sacred programming, prioritizing the preservation of critical personnel and systems. But in their mechanical wisdom, they also sealed my fate. The doors are maglocked, reinforced with blessed ceramite and adamantium, designed to withstand lance strikes and boarding actions. They will not open from the inside. I have tried. Emperor knows I have tried. I spent the first week hammering against the door controls with my sidearm, screaming into the Vox system that surely no longer functioned, praying that someone, anyone, would hear my pleas and respond. I fired my Lost pistol at the locking mechanism until the power cell depleted entirely, accomplishing nothing but adding the stench of scorched metal to my prison's atmosphere. The door did not yield. It will never yield. My wounds from the crash have mostly healed, at least the physical ones. 3 broken ribs, a fractured ulna, severe contusions across my torso and legs. Painful, debilitating, but not fatal. The ship's emergency medikit provided enough synth skin and counterseptic to prevent infection, enough stims to manage the pain during those first agonizing weeks. But the kit is long exhausted now, its contents consumed by necessity. The supplies are what concern me most. I have water, praise the Emperor for that small mercy, drawn from the emergency reservoir built into this compartment's walls. The reserve holds approximately 300 liters, enough for one person to survive for months if rationed carefully. I allow myself half a liter per day, sometimes less when the thirst is bearable. The water tastes of metal and machine oil, but it keeps me alive. Food is another matter entirely. The compartment's emergency ration locker contained 30 standard nutrient bars, each designed to provide 2,000 calories of sustenance. 60,000 calories. I have consumed 28 of those bars. 2 remain, and I do not know whether to eat them both today or stretch them across one final week of slow starvation. I think I will wait. Hope is an irrational thing, but I cling to it nonetheless. The silence is the worst part. Not the darkness, though that is terrible in its own right. Not the stale air or the gnawing hunger or the cold that seeps into my bones when I sleep on the bare deck plating. The silence is what threatens my sanity most acutely. It is a living thing, a presence that presses against my eardrums and crawls into my thoughts, amplifying every small sound I make until each breath becomes thunderous, each heartbeat a drum that echoes in my skull. I have begun talking to myself. At first, I resisted the urge, fearing that it signaled the onset of madness. But now I embrace it. My voice, hoarse and cracking from disuse, is the only proof I have that I still exist, that I am still human and not simply another broken component in this ship's vast network of failed systems. I narrate my actions as I perform them, describing the simple rituals that structure my days. Now I am standing. I will say aloud into the darkness. Now I am stretching my arms above my head. Now I am walking to the eastern bulkhead, 3 steps, 4 steps, 5 steps, and placing my hand against the cold metal. The compartment is 12 meters long and 8 meters wide. I have mapped every centimeter of it through touch alone, learning its geography as a blind man might learn the contours of a lover's face. I know where the command consoles stand silent and dead, their screens dark and their machine spirits departed. I know the location of the sealed blast door, its surface smooth except for the recessed control panel that mocks me with its unresponsiveness. I know the exact position of the ventilation grills, though no air flows through them anymore. I have created routines to preserve my sanity. Upon waking, though sleep and wakefulness have blurred into indistinct states, I perform the litany of devotion, reciting the words from memory as I was taught during my years of service in the Imperial Navy. The Emperor protects. The Emperor provides. The Emperor endures. I speak each line carefully, deliberately, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of prayer. After devotions, I exercise. Push-ups until my arms tremble. Squats until my legs burn. I run in place, counting my steps, pretending that I am covering distance instead of remaining fixed in this coffin of metal and darkness. The physical exertion serves multiple purposes. It maintains my strength, such as it is on minimal rations, and it generates heat to ward off the ever-present cold. Most importantly, it gives me purpose, a reason to continue existing for one more day. Then I eat, if eating is what I can call the act of consuming a tiny portion of nutrient bar followed by 3 careful sips of metallic water. I make it last as long as possible, chewing each bite slowly, letting it dissolve on my tongue before swallowing. A meal might occupy 30 minutes, sometimes longer. Time is meaningless here, but ritual is everything. The rest of my day, if day is even the correct term in this lightless void, is spent in contemplation, prayer, and increasingly desperate attempts to maintain my mental faculties. I recite everything I can remember: Imperial regulations, passages from the Tactica Imperium, the names of every ship in our battle group, the chain of command from the Lord Admiral down to the lowliest rating. I solve mathematical equations in my head, calculate trajectories and burn rates, and supply logistics for imaginary campaigns. I tell myself stories. This is perhaps the most damning evidence of my deteriorating mental state, but I find I do not care. The stories keep the silence at bay. They fill the void where human connection once existed. I construct elaborate narratives about my fellow crew members, imagining their fates after the crash. Did Commander Thrace survive? She was on the bridge when we hit atmosphere. Surely the command throne's protective system saved her. Did the Engineer crews make it to the escape pods? Did anyone make it? I imagine rescue missions. In my mind's eye, I see recovery teams cutting through the hull, their plasma torches casting blessed light into the darkness. I hear their voices calling out, searching for survivors. I rehearse what I will say when they find me, how I will maintain my composure and report in proper military fashion despite the weeks of isolation, despite the hunger and thirst and creeping madness. Decanus Voss, reporting. Tertiary command station intact. No other survivors in this section. Request immediate extraction and medical assessment. Professional. Composed. The words of a loyal servant of the Emperor, not a broken thing that has been talking to shadows in the dark. But the rescue does not come. Days pass, I think they are days, and the only sounds are those I create myself. The ship does not even creak anymore. Whatever settling and adjustment the wreckage underwent in those first weeks has concluded. The inexorable verdict has found its final resting position, become one with the planet it crashed upon, and nothing I do will change that fact. I have explored every possible means of escape. The ventilation system is too narrow for a grown man to navigate, even if I could somehow remove the grills, which I cannot, lacking proper tools. The deck plates are solid, offering no access to the crawlspaces and maintenance tunnels that run throughout the ship. The walls are reinforced bulkheads designed to withstand direct weapons fire. The ceiling is too high for me to reach, and even if I could, it offers no exit points. The blast door remains the only theoretical exit, and it is insurmountable. I have examined every millimeter of its surface, searching for weaknesses, for some flaw in its construction that I might exploit. There is none. It is a perfect barrier, fulfilling its function flawlessly. I am alive because of this door, protected from whatever catastrophic failures occurred in the surrounding sections. I am trapped because of this door, sealed away from any possibility of rescue or escape. The duality is maddening. On the 49th day, or what I believe to be the 49th day, I attempted to dismantle one of the dead command consoles, thinking that I might fashion some kind of tool or weapon from its components. I worked for hours using my belt buckle as a makeshift screwdriver, prying at access panels and trying to leverage pieces free. I succeeded in removing several internal components: circuit boards, power relays, sections of wiring. They lay on the floor around me in the darkness, useless trophies of pointless labor. I learned nothing from the exercise except that desperation makes fools of even trained Imperial officers. There are sounds sometimes, though I cannot determine if they are real or imagined. Distant thuds that might be debris settling elsewhere in the ship. A faint humming that could be residual energy in the power conduits, or simply the sound of my own blood flowing through my veins. Once, I thought I heard voices, muffled, indistinct, coming from somewhere beyond the sealed door. I screamed myself hoarse, pounding on the bulkhead until my fists bled, begging them to acknowledge me. The voices did not answer. Perhaps they were never there. Perhaps loneliness has begun crafting phantoms to populate my prison. I have discovered that the human mind is poorly designed for isolation. We are social creatures, dependent upon interaction and connection for our psychological well-being. Strip away those connections, remove the presence of others, and the mind begins to falter. It seeks companionship where none exists. It fabricates stimuli to replace the sensory input it craves. In the darkness, I have begun to see lights, swirling patterns of color that dance at the edges of my vision, phosphenes generated by my brain in the absence of actual photons. Sometimes they are beautiful spirals of gold and crimson, geometric patterns that pulse with rhythmic precision. Other times they are disturbing, shapes that suggest faces or reaching hands, forms that make me recoil even though I know they are not real. I have begun to doubt the distinction between real and unreal. When everything is darkness and silence, when the only certainty is the slow passage of time marked by dwindling supplies, reality becomes malleable. Memories feel more present than the deck beneath my feet. Dreams persist after waking. The boundary between consciousness and unconsciousness erodes until I am never quite sure which state I occupy. I sleep frequently now, more than I should. Sleep is escape, a temporary reprieve from the crushing awareness of my situation. In sleep, I am free. I walk under open skies, feel the sun on my face, hear the voices of comrades and loved ones. The dreams are vivid, more detailed and coherent than dreams have any right to be. I suspect this is my brain compensating for the sensory deprivation, generating elaborate fantasies to prevent total psychological collapse. Upon waking, the return to darkness is devastating. Each time, I hope that I will open my eyes to light, that the nightmare will have ended. Each time I am disappointed. The darkness remains absolute. The silence remains complete. I remain sealed within my tomb. I have thought extensively about death. It is impossible not to, given my circumstances. I calculate constantly how many days of water remain, how long I can survive without food, at what point my body will begin to shut down. The calculations change depending on my assumptions and activity levels, but they all converge on the same inevitable conclusion. I will die here, alone, in the dark. The question is not whether I will die, but how I will face that death when it arrives. Will I maintain my dignity and faith to the very end? Will I greet the Emperor's final judgment with a clear conscience and a loyal heart? Or will I break, descending into gibbering madness and dying as something less than the man I once was? I pray that I will remain strong, I pray that when death comes, it will find me reciting the litany of devotion, calling upon the Emperor's name with my final breath. But prayer and reality do not always align. I can feel myself eroding, worn down by relentless isolation and deprivation. I am not the same man who boarded the inexorable verdict all those months ago. That man had hope, had purpose, had faith that the Emperor would protect him from harm. This man, this thing I have become, knows that the Emperor's protection is not guaranteed. That faith alone cannot open sealed doors or conjure food from empty air. That sometimes loyal servants die in darkness, forgotten and unmourned. Their sacrifice noted only in death tolls and casualty reports. I have considered suicide. The thought came to me on the 71st day, creeping into my consciousness like a serpent. I have the means, the broken shards from the dismantled console, sharp enough to open veins. I could end this on my own terms, deny the slow starvation and madness that await me. I could die quickly, painlessly, preserving what remains of my sanity and dignity. But suicide is heresy. To take one's own life is to reject the Emperor's plan, to declare oneself superior to his divine will. I was taught this from my earliest days of instruction, the absolute prohibition against self-destruction drilled into my consciousness as thoroughly as weapons training or void warfare doctrine. To die by my own hand would be to doom my soul, to forfeit any hope of standing before the golden throne in the afterlife. And so I endure, not because I am strong, but because I am afraid of damnation, afraid that even this suffering might be part of some greater purpose I cannot comprehend, afraid that ending my life would constitute the ultimate failure of faith. The Emperor has a plan. I tell myself this constantly, a mantra against despair. The Emperor has a plan. This suffering serves a purpose. This test will prove my worthiness. I will be delivered, if not in this life then in the next, rewarded for my endurance and fidelity. But doubt gnaws at me. In the darkness, when the silence presses close and the hunger pain becomes unbearable, I wonder, what if there is no plan? What if the Emperor is not watching? What if I am simply a casualty of circumstance? An unlucky soul trapped by random chance in a prison of metal and darkness, and my death will mean nothing to anyone. These are dangerous thoughts, heretical thoughts. I push them away, bury them beneath layers of prayer and devotion, but they return. Always they return. I have begun to hallucinate with increasing frequency. At first, the hallucinations were minor, fleeting shadows in my peripheral vision, phantom sounds that lasted only moments. But they have evolved, becoming more complex and persistent. I see people now, figures that stand in the darkness, silent and watching. I know they are not real, understand on an intellectual level that my brain is manufacturing these presences, yet they feel real. They have weight and substance. They occupy space in my prison. There is a woman who appears most frequently. I do not recognize her face, though it is beautiful in the classical sense. High cheekbones, full lips, dark eyes that reflect no light because there is no light to reflect. She stands near the sealed door, always in the same position, wearing robes that might be ceremonial vestments or simply elaborate civilian garb. She never speaks, never moves, simply watches me with an expression I cannot interpret. I have named her Cassandra, after a figure from ancient Terran mythology. The name seems appropriate for a prophet who is never heard, a presence that observes but does not interact. Good morning, Cassandra. I say when I wake to find her standing vigil. My voice is a cracked whisper, barely recognizable as human. Still here, I see. Still keeping watch. Do you have any wisdom to share today? Any insights into my predicament? She does not answer. She never answers. But I find comfort in her presence nonetheless. Madness, perhaps, but a benign madness. Better to have company, even imaginary company, than to face the darkness alone. There are others. A naval rating in a torn uniform, his face obscured by burns. An elderly man in administratum robes, hunched over a data slate that exists only in my fevered imagination. A child, Emperor preserve me, a child, who sits in the corner and weeps silently, tears I can see despite the absolute darkness. I know they are not real. I know this, But knowing does not make them disappear. I have conversations with them, long rambling discussions about theology and duty, about the nature of suffering and the possibility of redemption. I argue points of Imperial doctrine with the administrative official, debate fleet tactics with the burned rating, try to comfort the weeping child with promises that rescue is coming soon. They are better conversationalists than the darkness. They do not judge me when I weep or rage or confess my doubts. They simply listen, silent witnesses to my deterioration. The hunger has become a constant companion now, more reliable than any hallucination. It gnaws at my stomach, a hollow ache that never truly subsides even immediately after eating my meager rations. My body is consuming itself, breaking down muscle tissue to fuel basic metabolic functions. I can feel myself weakening, each movement requiring greater effort than it did the day before. Standing leaves me dizzy. Walking across the compartment requires rest periods. I have begun to wonder what death by starvation feels like. I have heard accounts, clinical descriptions from survival training, anecdotal stories from soldiers who witness comrades die in siege situations. The body shuts down incrementally, conserving energy by reducing non-essential functions. Mental acuity declines. Organ systems fail in sequence. Eventually, the heart simply stops, unable to continue without fuel. It is supposed to be relatively peaceful once the hunger pain passes, a gradual fading rather than acute agony. I find some comfort in this, though perhaps the sources of my information were lying, offering false reassurance to trainees who might one day face such a fate. I have one nutrient bar remaining, 1,000 calories standing between me and the final decline. I keep it in my left breast pocket, check constantly to ensure it is still there, that I have not somehow lost it in the darkness. The wrapper crinkles under my fingers, a small sound that brings disproportionate relief. I am saving it. For what, I cannot say. Perhaps for a special occasion. A birthday or anniversary that I will celebrate alone in the dark. Perhaps for the moment when hope finally dies completely, when I accept that no rescue is coming and allow myself to let go. Perhaps I will never eat it at all, dying with that final meal uneaten. A symbolic gesture of defiance against fate. The water supply is also running low. The reservoir's flow has diminished to a trickle, the pressure insufficient to maintain a steady stream. I catch drops on my tongue, patient as a penitent receiving the emperor's blessing, letting each precious droplet slide down my throat. At this rate, the water will last perhaps another week, possibly two if I am extraordinarily disciplined. After that, there is nothing. No backup systems, no emergency reserves. Just the slow process of dehydration, faster and more brutal than starvation. Thirst will become unbearable. My tongue will swell, my lips crack and bleed. Delirium will set in, perhaps bringing visions of water, cruel mirages conjured by a dying brain. I try not to think about it. I focus instead on the present moment, on the simple act of existing for one more hour, one more minute. The future is a horror I cannot face. The past is a paradise I cannot return to. Only the now remains, and even that is slipping away from me. I have begun preparing for death in earnest. I arrange my uniform as best I can, straightening the jacket, smoothing the creases. I want to be found looking dignified, like an officer of the Imperial Navy rather than a maddened animal. I practice the words I will say at the moment of death, the final prayer I will offer to the God Emperor. My life for the golden throne, my service complete. Accept this humble servant into your eternal presence, that I might continue the fight beyond the veil of death. The Emperor protects. I rehearse the speech repeatedly, ensuring I will be able to deliver it even in a state of extreme weakness. These will be my final words, my epitaph, the last evidence of my existence. They must be perfect. But there is also anger. Beneath the resignation and acceptance, beneath the prayers and preparation, there is a core of burning rage that I cannot suppress. I am angry at the universe for placing me in this situation. Angry at the enemy who shot down our ship. Angry at the crew who failed to rescue me. Angry at the Emperor himself for allowing this suffering. The anger frightens me more than the physical deprivation. It suggests doubt, suggests that my faith has been compromised by desperation. A truly faithful servant would accept this trial without complaint, would trust in the Emperor's wisdom absolutely. My anger marks me as weak, as unworthy of the uniform I wear. Yet I cannot stop it. It rises in waves, overwhelming my attempts at rational control. I scream into the darkness, incoherent roars of frustration and despair. I beat my fists against the walls until the pain forces me to stop. I curse the Emperor, blasphemous words that horrify me even as they pour from my mouth. Afterward, I collapse in tears, begging forgiveness for my weakness, praying that the Emperor will understand that these are the words of a broken man, not the true sentiments of my heart. But are they? In the darkness, I can no longer distinguish between my genuine beliefs and the lies I tell myself for comfort. Have I ever truly believed in the Emperor's divinity? Or have I simply repeated the prescribed dogmas because that is what was expected? Is my faith real, or is it merely conditioning, training that runs so deep I mistake it for genuine conviction? These questions would be heresy to voice aloud, would likely result in summary execution if spoken in any other context. But here, in this sealed tomb where no one can hear, I allow myself to wonder. What is faith without doubt? What is loyalty that has never been tested? Perhaps this isolation is stripping away the veneer of civilization, revealing the fundamental nature of my beliefs or lack thereof. I think I believed once. I remember moments of genuine religious feeling, experiences that seemed to confirm the Emperor's presence in the universe. The first time I stood on a ship's observation deck and gazed out at the immensity of the void, I felt something that I interpreted as divine awe, a sense of the sacred vastness of the Emperor's realm. When our battle group defeated a chaos incursion in the Segmentum Obscurus, when I saw the enemy ships burning and breaking apart, I thanked the Emperor for our victory with tears of gratitude streaming down my face. Those moments felt real. But were they evidence of divine intervention, or simply the emotional responses of a mind trained from childhood to interpret events through a religious framework? Would I have felt the same awe, the same gratitude, if I had been raised in a different culture with different beliefs? I do not know, cannot know, and the uncertainty is more terrifying than any physical danger I have faced. The hallucinations have changed character. They are no longer passive observers but active participants in my mental landscape. Cassandra speaks to me now, her voice a whisper that seems to come from inside my own skull. You are alone, she tells me. You have always been alone. The Emperor does not hear your prayers. The Emperor does not care about your suffering. You are nothing, less than nothing, a speck of insignificance in an uncaring universe. I know these are my own thoughts, my own doubts given voice through the fiction of her presence. But knowing their origin does not diminish their power. They torment me, these whispered heresies, precisely because some part of me believes they might be true. I argue with her, defending my faith with citations from the Lectitio Divinitatis and appeals to Imperial theology. I remind myself, of the Emperor's sacrifices, of his 10,000 years of suffering upon the golden throne for the sake of humanity. Surely such dedication proves his divinity, proves that we matter to him, that our individual struggles are part of a greater pattern of meaning and purpose. Prove it, Cassandra whispers. Show me evidence. Not faith, not dogma, not stories told by priests to control the masses. Show me actual, empirical evidence that the Emperor is divine, that he cares about you personally, that your death in this darkness serves any purpose whatsoever. I cannot. Emperor, forgive me. I cannot. The child who weeps in the corner has begun to speak as well, though his words are not accusatory like Cassandra's. He asks questions, simple and devastating. Why am I here? When will my mother come? Will it hurt when I die? I have no answers for him. I want to comfort him, to promise that everything will be all right, but I cannot bring myself to lie to a child, even an imaginary one. So I sit beside him in the darkness, or rather, I sit beside the space where I imagine him to be, and I weep with him, two lost souls awaiting an end that neither of us invited. The burned rating speaks less frequently, but when he does, his words are pragmatic and terrible. You're wasting time with prayer. Accept that you're going to die and face it like a soldier. The water's almost gone. You should drink it all now, enjoy it while you can. There are sharp objects in this room. You know what you need to do. I refuse to listen to him. I categorize his suggestions as enemy action, intrusive thoughts generated by despair rather than reason. But they persist, recurring with greater frequency and intensity as my physical condition deteriorates. I have entered what I believe to be the final stage. My body has begun shutting down in earnest. I can barely stand without collapsing. My thoughts are increasingly disjointed, jumping from topic to topic without coherent connection. I lose time, emerging from fugue states with no memory of the intervening hours. The water is gone. The last drops trickled from the reservoir 2 days ago? Or was it 3 days? I have lost track. My mouth is a desert, my tongue swollen and useless. Swallowing has become painful, each attempt feeling like I am forcing gravel down my throat. The final nutrient bar remains in my pocket. I have touched it compulsively, checking its presence, but I have not eaten it. I am saving it, though I no longer remember why. Perhaps there is no reason. Perhaps it is simply the last vestige of control I possess, the final decision I can make in a situation where all other choices have been stripped away. I will not die today. I tell myself this, a daily affirmation that has lost all meaning. I will not die today because I still draw breath, still think, still exist. Tomorrow is uncertain, but today I endure. Except I am no longer certain what day it is. Time has collapsed completely, past and present and future merging into a single eternal moment of suffering. I could be dying right now, already dead, already standing before the golden throne to face the Emperor's judgment. This darkness might be death, this silence the void that follows the cessation of consciousness. No, I still feel pain. The dead do not feel pain. My ribs ache. My head pounds with dehydration. My stomach cramps with hunger. Therefore I live. Therefore I endure. I attempt to stand, intending to recite the litany of devotion one final time. My legs buckle. I collapse to the deck, striking my head against metal. Stars explode across my vision. Not the beautiful phosphenes I have grown accustomed to, but bright lances of pain that momentarily illuminate the darkness. I lie there, unable to move, tasting blood where I have bitten my tongue. This might be the end. This might be how I die. Face down on cold metal, alone and unmourned, my final prayer unspoken. But I am not ready. Not yet. With trembling hands, I reach into my pocket and retrieve the final nutrient bar. The wrapper crinkles obscenely loud in the silence. I tear it open, bring the bar to my lips, take a bite. The taste is cardboard and chemical sweetness, the most delicious thing I have ever experienced. I chew slowly, savoring each morsel, crying because this is simultaneously a celebration of life and an acknowledgement of death's inevitability. I eat the entire bar, all 1,000 calories, consumed in a single meal, violating every rationing principle I have followed for months. It does not matter anymore. There will be no further supplies. This is the last food I will ever taste. When I finish, I lie still, feeling the food settle into my empty stomach. Energy begins to flow back into my limbs, my brain clearing slightly as glucose reaches my cells. It is a temporary reprieve, a brief surge of strength before the final collapse. But I am grateful for it. I use this renewed energy to drag myself across the compartment to the sealed door. I press my palm against its surface, feeling the cold metal, the absolute barrier between myself and the world beyond. Is anyone there? I whisper. My voice is barely audible, destroyed by weeks of screaming and dehydration. Can anyone hear me? Silence answers. It has always answered with silence. My name is Decanus Kirill Voss. I continue, speaking to the emptiness. I served aboard the inexorable verdict with honor and loyalty. I did my duty. I maintained my faith. I falter, the words catching in my throat. What is the point of this testimony? There is no one to hear it, no record being made, no witness to my final moments. I don't want to die. I confess to the darkness. Emperor, forgive me. I don't want to die alone in the dark. I am afraid. I am so terribly afraid. The admission breaks something inside me, a dam that has held back months of suppressed emotion. I weep, great racking sobs that shake my entire body, crying out the fear and loneliness and despair that I have carried since the ship crashed. I cry for the life I will not live, the future that has been stolen from me. I cry for the people I will never see again, the places I will never visit, the experiences I will never have. I cry because I am human, and humans are not meant to face death alone. Time passes, perhaps minutes, perhaps hours. Eventually, the tears stop. Emotional exhaustion leaves me hollow, emptied of feeling. I remain pressed against the door, too weak to move, too tired to care. And then I hear it, a sound. Not imagined, not a hallucination conjured by a dying brain. A real sound, coming from beyond the door. A scraping, grinding noise, metal on metal, the unmistakable signature of cutting tools. Cannot breathe, cannot think, cannot process what I am hearing. The sound continues, growing louder. Sparks appear. Actual light, brilliant and blinding after months of absolute darkness. I shield my eyes, crying out in pain and shock and overwhelming relief. Someone is cutting through the door. Someone is here. Someone is rescuing me. Here. I try to scream, but my voice is gone, reduced to a rasping croak. I'm here. I'm alive. The cutting continues. A line of incandescent light traces a rectangular outline in the door, plasma torches eating through blessed ceramite and adamantium. The light is agonizing, searing my eyes, but I do not look away. I stare at it, transfixed, drinking in the radiance like a man dying of thirst who has found water. The rectangle of metal falls inward with a tremendous crash. Light floods the compartment. Not sunlight, but the harsh white glare of industrial lumens, and it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Figures appear in the opening, shapes backlit and indistinct, but undeniably real, undeniably human. Survivor located. One of them calls out, his voice distorted by a Vox speaker in his helmet. Medical team to tertiary command. Immediate extraction required. They are here. They found me. Against all probability, against every rational expectation. Someone came looking for survivors in the wreckage of the inexorable verdict, and they found me. I try to stand, to greet my rescuers with proper military bearing, but my body refuses to cooperate. I collapse, caught by armored hands before I strike the deck. Easy, brother, a voice says. You're safe now. We've got you. Safe. The word sounds foreign, a concept from another life. But as I am lifted onto a stretcher, as medical personnel swarm around me checking vitals and administering emergency treatment, I begin to believe it might be true. I am alive. Impossibly, inexplicably, I am alive. As they carry me through the wreckage toward extraction, I catch glimpses of the ship's interior. Twisted metal, burned-out sections, corridors collapsed and choked with debris. The inexorable verdict is a corpse, beyond any hope of salvage or repair. But it served one final purpose. It kept me alive long enough for rescue to arrive. Outside, daylight assaults my eyes with painful intensity. I see sky, actual sky, pale blue and infinite, dotted with clouds. I see the rescue ship, a Valkyrie assault transport sitting on landing struts, its engines idling, waiting to carry me away from this place of death. I see other survivors. Not many. A handful of crew members sitting on supply crates, wrapped in thermal blankets, looking as traumatized and disbelieving as I feel. We are not numerous. Perhaps 20 souls pulled from the wreckage of a ship that carried 3,000. But we are alive. The medical tech leaning over my stretcher is speaking, asking questions about my condition, my time in isolation, my symptoms. I try to answer, but the words come out garbled and nonsensical. Dehydration and starvation have taken their toll. My brain is not functioning properly. It's all right, the tech says gently. Don't try to talk. We'll take care of you. You're going to survive this. Survive. Another foreign word. Another impossible concept. But as they load me into the Valkyrie, as the engines roar to life and we lift off from the crash site, I begin to believe. I survived. I endured the darkness and the silence and the slow erosion of sanity, and I emerged on the other side. The Emperor, whether through divine intervention or simple random chance, allowed me to live. The transit to the recovery station is a blur of sensations. The vibration of the Valkyrie's engines, the murmur of voices around me, the sharp sting of needles as the medical team establishes intravenous lines, pumping fluids and nutrients into my depleted body. I drift in and out of consciousness, reality blending with fevered dreams, unable to distinguish between what is actually happening and what my mind is inventing. At some point, we land. I am transferred to a proper medical facility, a structure that smells of antiseptic and sacred oils, where robed medici personnel move with practiced efficiency. They strip away my filthy uniform, revealing the shocking extent of my physical deterioration. I have lost approximately 25 kilograms, nearly a third of my original body mass. My skin is stretched tight over prominent bones, covered in pressure sores and contusions. My muscles have atrophied to the point where I cannot perform even basic movements without assistance. But I am alive. The medici confirm this repeatedly, as if my survival is somehow remarkable. Perhaps it is. Perhaps I should not have lasted as long as I did on minimal supplies in total isolation. Perhaps the Emperor truly was watching over me, extending my life until rescue became possible. I am placed in a recovery ward, a private room with clean sheets and functioning lights. Lights I can control, dimming them to a tolerable level after months of darkness. The adjustment is difficult. My eyes have adapted so completely to absolute darkness that even moderate illumination causes pain. The medici assure me this will pass, that my vision will normalize within a few weeks of gradual exposure. A priest comes to see me on the second day. He is an elderly man, his face lined with age and wisdom, wearing the crimson robes of the ecclesiarchy. He sits beside my bed and asks if I would like to pray, if I require spiritual counsel in addition to medical treatment. I tell him everything. The words pour out of me in a disjointed rush. The crash, the sealed compartment, the darkness and silence and slowly dying hope. I confess my doubts, the heretical thoughts that plagued me in isolation, the anger I felt toward the Emperor. I describe the hallucinations, the conversations with phantoms, the way reality itself seemed to dissolve. He listens without interruption, his expression neutral, offering no judgment. When I finish, exhausted by the confession, he is silent for a long moment. "Do you believe the Emperor saved you?" he asks finally. I consider the question carefully. Do I believe, or do I simply want to believe? I don't know, I admit. I want to, but I cannot reconcile faith with what I experienced. If the Emperor was watching over me, why did he allow such suffering? If he is all-powerful, why did he not open the door, or guide rescuers to me sooner, or prevent the crash entirely? The priest nods as if he expected this response. These are questions that have troubled the faithful since humanity first looked to the heavens and wondered if anyone was watching. I cannot provide answers that will satisfy your doubt, Decanus Vos. But I can offer you this perspective. Perhaps the Emperor's mercy is not measured in the prevention of suffering, but in the strength to endure it. That seems a cruel mercy, I say. Perhaps, he agrees. But consider, you faced death alone in absolute darkness. You confronted the limits of faith and sanity. You experienced isolation that would have broken most men. And yet you survived. Not because you were particularly strong or particularly faithful, but because you refused to surrender. You endured when endurance seemed impossible. Is that not itself a kind of grace? I think about this for days after he leaves. Is survival evidence of divine intervention? Or is it simply the result of fortunate circumstances? A door that happened to seal me in a section with water reserves, a rescue team that happened to search thoroughly enough to detect life signs in the wreckage, a body that happened to be resilient enough to withstand prolonged starvation? I do not have answers. Perhaps I never will. Faith and doubt coexist within me now, two contrary truths that I cannot reconcile. I believe the Emperor exists. I believe he is watching over humanity in some capacity. But I no longer believe with the absolute certainty I once possessed. The darkness stripped that certainty away, leaving behind something more complex and troubling. Physical recovery is slow but steady. The medici feed me carefully, gradually increasing my caloric intake to avoid refeeding syndrome, a dangerous condition that can occur when nutrition is reintroduced too rapidly after prolonged starvation. I spend weeks in bed, regaining strength, relearning how to perform basic functions that I once took for granted. Walking is particularly difficult. My muscles have atrophied to the point where supporting my own weight requires intense concentration and effort. I progress from bedbound to wheelchair-bound to walker-assisted ambulation, each stage a victory and a humiliation. I was once a trained naval officer, capable of performing complex duties under stress. Now I struggle to walk 10 meters without collapsing. The psychological recovery is more complex. I suffer from nightmares, vivid dreams that return me to the sealed compartment. I wake screaming in the darkness of my room, convinced that the door has sealed again, that the lights and medical care and human contact are all elaborate hallucinations conjured by my dying brain. The medici personnel rush to my side, calm me, reassure me that I am safe, but the terror does not fully subside. I cannot tolerate darkness. Even the simple act of closing my eyes triggers panic, the fear that I will open them to find myself back in that metal tomb. I sleep with lights on, request that my room's lumens be set to maximum brightness at all times. The other patients in the recovery ward complain about the light spilling under my door, but I cannot bring myself to care. Darkness is my enemy now, a presence that threatens to swallow me whole. Isolation is equally intolerable. I panic when left alone for more than a few minutes, convinced that I have been abandoned, forgotten, sealed away once more. I beg the medici staff to stay with me, to talk to me, to confirm that I am not alone. They accommodate my requests when possible, but they have other patients, other duties. I cannot monopolize their time indefinitely. A psychologist is assigned to my case. He is a thin man with kind eyes, trained in treating psychological trauma. He explains that what I am experiencing is normal, that prolonged isolation and near-death experiences often result in lasting psychological effects, anxiety and depression and post-traumatic responses that can persist for years. You survived an ordeal that would have killed most people, he tells me. The fact that you are experiencing psychological difficulties is not a weakness. It is evidence of what you endured. He teaches me techniques for managing the panic, breathing exercises, grounding methods, cognitive strategies for distinguishing between present reality and traumatic memory. The techniques help, though they do not eliminate the fear entirely. I suspect I will carry this trauma for the rest of my life, a psychological scar that will never fully heal. After 6 weeks of intensive rehabilitation, I am deemed fit for discharge from the medical facility. Fit is perhaps too strong a word. I am functional, capable of basic self-care, but far from the man I was before the crash. My body bears the physical marks of prolonged starvation. Loose skin where fat reserves once existed, persistent weakness in my limbs, teeth that have become loose in their sockets due to nutritional deficiencies. But these physical scars are minor compared to the psychological changes. I am fundamentally altered by my experience in the darkness, transformed into someone I do not fully recognize. The certainties that once anchored my existence have dissolved, replaced by doubt and existential questioning that I cannot suppress. I am reassigned to administrative duties, deemed unfit for active naval service. This decision does not surprise me. I can barely walk without assistance. I certainly cannot perform the physical demands of shipboard duty. But the reassignment feels like a demotion, a public acknowledgement of my diminished status. I am given quarters in the administrative complex, a small room with a bed and desk and window that looks out over the military compound. The room is comfortable by naval standards, private and well-maintained, but I find I cannot stay in it for long periods. The walls feel too close, the space too confining. I spend my evenings walking the compound, moving aimlessly through corridors and common areas, seeking open spaces and human contact. Other soldiers notice me, though they rarely approach. Word of my ordeal has spread throughout the station. I am the survivor, the man who was sealed in darkness for nearly 5 months and emerged alive. Some regard me with respect, others with pity, a few with poorly concealed disgust. I represent something uncomfortable, a reminder that the Emperor's protection is not guaranteed, that loyal service can end in suffering and near death rather than glory. I avoid mirrors. When I must confront my reflection, I see a stranger, a gaunt, hollow-eyed creature that bears only superficial resemblance to the man I remember being. My hair has gone partially gray, shock-white streaks running through brown. My face is deeply lined, aged decades by months of suffering. My eyes carry a haunted quality, a darkness that no amount of light can fully dispel. I attend chapel services regularly, seeking comfort in ritual and community. The familiar liturgies provide structure, anchor me in tradition and shared belief. But I find I cannot pray with the same fervor I once possessed. The words feel hollow, rote recitations devoid of genuine feeling. I mouth them dutifully, but they do not reach the place inside me where faith once resided. The priest who counseled me in the medical facility seeks me out occasionally, checking on my spiritual well-being. We have long conversations about theodicy, the question of why an all-powerful, benevolent deity permits suffering. He offers various theological frameworks for understanding my experience. Suffering as test, suffering as purification, suffering as mysterious divine will that transcends human comprehension. None of these explanations satisfy me. They feel like rationalizations, attempts to impose meaning on random cruelty. But I do not argue with him. He means well, and perhaps his faith is strong enough that these explanations genuinely bring him comfort. Mine is not. I begin writing. At first, the writing is purely therapeutic, journal entries that describe my experiences, attempts to process trauma through documentation. But gradually, the writing becomes something more deliberate. I decide to create a full account of my time sealed in the inexorable verdict, a testimony that might help others understand what prolonged isolation does to the human mind. The writing is difficult, emotionally exhausting. Each session requires me to mentally return to that darkness, to relive experiences I would prefer to forget. But I persist, driven by a need to bear witness, to ensure that my suffering is not meaningless. If nothing else, this account might serve as a training document, helping future naval personnel understand the psychological challenges of isolation, so they might be better prepared if they face similar circumstances. As I write, patterns emerge. I begin to understand aspects of my experience that were opaque while I was living through them. The hallucinations, for example, I can now recognize them as my mind's attempts to maintain social connection in the absence of actual human contact. Cassandra was not a tormentor but a companion, a presence my brain created to stave off total psychological collapse. The weeping child represented my own vulnerability, the part of me that was terrified and needed comfort. The burned rating embodied my pragmatic survival instincts, the voice urging me to accept reality and make hard choices. Understanding these mechanisms does not eliminate the trauma, but it provides context. I was not going mad, or rather, I was experiencing a specific, predictable form of psychological breakdown that humans undergo when subjected to extreme isolation. My responses were normal, adaptive, even given the circumstances. This recognition brings a measure of peace. I was not weak. I was not faithless. I was simply human, subject to the same psychological limitations that affect all humans when pushed beyond their breaking points. Months pass. I continue my administrative duties, process paperwork, attend briefings, maintain the bureaucratic machinery of the Imperial Navy. The work is tedious but manageable. I am competent at it, even if my heart is not engaged. Passes the time, provides structure, gives me a reason to rise each morning. But I am not happy. Happiness seems an impossible state, a condition that belongs to my previous life. I exist in a state of perpetual low-level anxiety, always aware that catastrophe might be one door seal away, one mechanical failure from returning me to darkness and isolation. I avoid enclosed spaces when possible. I take stairs rather than elevators, walk through open corridors rather than cutting through enclosed passages. When I must enter a room, I prop the door open, ensuring I always have an escape route. These behaviors mark me as eccentric, damaged, but I cannot bring myself to care about others' judgments. I make few friends among my fellow soldiers. Conversation is difficult. They discuss ordinary concerns like leave schedules and romantic entanglements, topics that seem trivial to me now. I cannot relate to their normalcy, their assumption that life will continue along predictable paths. I know too intimately how quickly everything can change, how a single moment can transform a normal day into the beginning of an ordeal that lasts months. There is one person I connect with, a woman named Dahlia, a logistics officer who was also aboard the Inexorable Verdict when it crashed. She survived in a different section of the ship, was extracted within days rather than months, but she understands aspects of trauma that others cannot. We speak occasionally, careful conversations about shared experience. Do you still dream about it? She asks one evening as we sit in the compound's common area. Every night, I admit. Sometimes I'm back in the compartment. Sometimes the door seals while I'm in ordinary rooms, my quarters, the mess hall, chapel. The specifics vary, but the core is always the same. I am trapped, alone, and no one is coming to help me. She nods. I dream that I'm drowning. My section flooded during the crash. I made it to an air pocket, but in my dreams, the water keeps rising, and I can't find a way out. Do the dreams ever stop? Ask. I don't know. It's only been 8 months. The psychologists say it gets better with time, but I don't know if they're telling the truth or just trying to be encouraging. Does it matter? Ask. Whether it's truth or encouragement, the result is the same. We continue existing, day after day, carrying what we carry. That's a bleak perspective, she observes. I suppose it is, but bleakness seems appropriate, given our circumstances. We survived when thousands of our comrades died. We should be grateful, and perhaps part of me is, but mostly I just feel empty, like something essential was burned out of me in that darkness, and I'm now operating with diminished capacity. What did you lose? She asks. In that compartment, what part of yourself was burned away? I consider the question carefully. What did I lose? The answer is complex, multifaceted, not easily reduced to simple statements. Certainty, I say finally. I lost the ability to believe absolutely. Before the crash, I knew, or thought I knew, that the Emperor was watching over me, that my service mattered, that the universe operated according to divine plan. Those beliefs were not faith in the traditional sense. They were facts, foundational truths I did not question. But in the darkness, those certainties dissolved. I called out to the Emperor and heard only silence. I prayed for deliverance and received none. I was forced to confront the possibility that I was alone, that no divine presence was monitoring my suffering, that I might die unmourned and forgotten. And once you truly confront that possibility, once you sit with it for months in absolute darkness, you cannot simply pretend it was never real. The doubt remains, permanent and corrosive. Dahlia is quiet for a long moment. When she speaks, her voice is soft. Do you regret surviving? The question catches me off guard. Do I regret it? I should say no immediately, should affirm that life is precious, that survival is always preferable to death. But I find I cannot offer that simple answer. Sometimes, I admit, there are moments when I think death would have been cleaner, simpler. The man I was before the crash effectively died in that compartment. What survived is something else. Someone who carries all my memories but lacks the fundamental optimism and faith that once defined me. So in a sense, I did die. This is just a prolonged aftermath, years of walking around in a corpse that forgot to stop breathing. That's horrifying, Dahlia says. Yes, I agree. It is. But it's also the truth, at least as I experience it. Perhaps that will change. Perhaps given enough time, enough therapy, enough distance from the trauma, I will rediscover something resembling my former self. But right now, 8 months removed from rescue, I feel fundamentally broken in ways I lack the tools to repair. We sit in silence, 2 damaged survivors contemplating the wreckage of our former lives. There is no comfort in the conversation, no resolution or hopeful conclusion. But there is a kind of solidarity, an acknowledgement that we share experiences most others cannot comprehend. Over the following months, I make incremental progress. The nightmares become less frequent. occurring 2 or 3 times per week rather than nightly. I begin to tolerate brief periods of solitude without panic, though I still prefer company when possible. My physical condition improves through sustained rehabilitation. I will never return to peak fitness, but I regain enough strength to function normally in administrative roles. But the fundamental changes remain. I am not the man I was. I cannot recapture the simple faith that once sustained me. The universe seems colder now, more indifferent, a vast machine that operates according to physical laws rather than divine intention. Humans matter only to the extent that we matter to each other. There is no cosmic significance to our struggles, no guaranteed happy ending, no benevolent overseer ensuring that virtue is rewarded and suffering has meaning. This is perhaps the most difficult truth I have learned. That meaning is not inherent but constructed. My time sealed in darkness was not a test, not a purification, not part of some divine plan. It was simply a series of mechanical failures and unfortunate circumstances that resulted in my imprisonment. I survived because rescue teams were thorough, because my compartment happened to have water reserves, because my body happened to be resilient enough to withstand prolonged starvation. There is no deeper significance, no hidden lesson, no purpose beyond the random play of cause and effect. And yet, paradoxically, I find this truth liberating in some ways. If suffering has no inherent meaning, then I am free to construct my own meaning, to decide what significance my experiences hold. I choose to view my survival not as evidence of divine favor but as a testament to human resilience, both my own and that of the rescue team who spent weeks searching the wreckage, refusing to give up hope that survivors might remain. I choose to honor the thousands who died in the crash by living deliberately, by not wasting the life that was preserved through random chance. I choose to help others who face similar traumas, offering whatever understanding and support I can provide based on my experiences. These choices do not erase what I endured, do not restore what I lost, but they provide a framework for moving forward. A year after the crash, I am offered a new assignment: training naval personnel in survival psychology, preparing them for the mental challenges they might face in extreme situations. The role draws directly on my experiences, asks me to transform private trauma into public utility. I accept the assignment, not because I believe I am healed, I am not and may never be, but because it offers purpose, a way to ensure that my suffering contributes to something beyond itself. If my testimony can help one person maintain their sanity in isolation, if my story can convince one commander to prioritize thorough rescue operations even when the odds of finding survivors seem minimal, then perhaps the darkness I endured was not entirely meaningless. I begin developing training materials, drawing on both my personal experience and formal psychological research. I consult with experts in trauma and isolation, integrate their knowledge with my lived understanding. The result is a comprehensive program designed to prepare naval personnel for worst-case scenarios, not just the physical challenges of survival, but the psychological battles that accompany extreme isolation. The training includes practical strategies: how to structure time in the absence of external cues, how to maintain mental acuity through deliberate cognitive exercises, how to recognize the early signs of psychological breakdown, when to trust hallucinations and when to dismiss them. But it also includes something more difficult to quantify: an honest acknowledgement that sometimes faith is not enough, that sometimes the emperor does not intervene, that sometimes loyal servants suffer and die despite doing everything right. This honesty is controversial. Several senior officers object to my inclusion of doubt and theological questioning in the training materials, arguing that it undermines morale and contradicts Imperial doctrine. But I refuse to remove it. Soldiers deserve the truth. They deserve to understand that survival in extreme conditions requires not blind faith but flexible thinking, not rigid adherence to dogma but willingness to adapt and endure regardless of one's beliefs. The debate escalates to higher command levels. Eventually, a compromise is reached. My training program is approved for specialized personnel: scout crews, deep void explorers, anyone whose duties might result in prolonged isolation, but is not mandated for standard naval ratings. I accept this compromise. It is better than nothing, better than allowing my experiences to remain private trauma rather than shared knowledge. I deliver my first training session to a group of 30 scout crew members preparing for a long-range exploration mission. They listen with varying degrees of attention, some engaged and thoughtful, others clearly skeptical that anything I say could prepare them for true crisis. At the end of the session, a young rating approaches me. He cannot be more than 20 standard years old, fresh-faced and eager, untouched by the kind of trauma that has marked me. "Sir," he says, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you believe in the Emperor? After everything that happened to you, do you still have faith?" I consider lying, offering the comfortable platitude that would reassure him and align with official doctrine. But I have committed myself to honesty, and I will not betray that commitment now. "I believe in the Emperor's historical existence," I say carefully. "I believe he sacrificed himself to protect humanity, that he remains enthroned on Terra. But do I believe he is actively monitoring each of us, intervening in our individual struggles? I don't know. My experience suggests otherwise, but absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Perhaps he was watching over me, and I simply could not perceive his presence. Perhaps he was not, and I survived through random chance. I cannot resolve that question definitively." The rating looks troubled. "Then how do you cope? If you're not sure the Emperor is protecting you, how do you find the courage to continue serving?" "By recognizing that courage does not require certainty," I tell him. "I serve because humans matter to each other, because the Imperium, flawed as it is, represents our collective attempt to survive in a hostile universe. I serve because my comrades deserve someone who will not abandon them, regardless of whether cosmic forces are paying attention. I serve because meaning is not given but created, and I choose to create meaning through loyalty and dedication rather than surrendering to nihilism." The rating nods slowly, processing this. I cannot tell if my answer satisfies him or disturbs him. Perhaps both. "Thank you, sir," he says finally. "I'll think about what you've said." He leaves, and I am alone again, though not truly alone, as others mill about the training facility, engaged in their own preparations and conversations. I am learning to tolerate solitude without panic, learning to exist in the spaces between constant human contact and total isolation. I think about that young rating often in the following days, wondering what he made of our conversation. Did I help him, or did I simply transfer some of my own doubt and trauma onto an impressionable mind? There is no way to know. Teaching is an act of faith in its own right, faith that sharing knowledge and experience will benefit others, even when the outcomes are uncertain and unverifiable. Years pass. I continue my work training naval personnel, refining my materials, expanding the program's scope. I am promoted to senior training specialist, given authority to shape how the entire segmentum approaches survival psychology. It is meaningful work that draws directly on my hardest experiences and transforms them into something useful. But I never fully recover from my time sealed in the inexorable verdict. The psychological scars remain, less acute than they once were but never completely healed. I still avoid unnecessary time in enclosed spaces. I still sleep with lights on. I still experience moments of sudden, overwhelming panic when circumstances trigger memories of that darkness. I have learned to live with these limitations, to work around them rather than against them. I am not the man I was before the crash, will never be that man again. But I am functional, purposeful, engaged with life in ways that seemed impossible during those first terrible months after rescue. I think often about meaning, about why we suffer, and what significance we can extract from experiences that seem designed only to break us. I have concluded that there are no universal answers, no theological frameworks that fully explain or justify extreme suffering. Each person must construct their own meaning, decide for themselves what their experiences represent and how they will respond. For me, the meaning I have constructed centers on testimony and service. My time sealed in darkness becomes meaningful because I refuse to let it remain private trauma. I share it, use it to help others, transform it from pure suffering into something that might prevent or ameliorate others' suffering. This does not erase what I endured, nothing can do that, but it provides a framework for carrying it. I received word last week that the wreckage of the inexorable verdict is being dismantled for scrap, its usable components salvaged, the rest melted down for raw materials. The ship that was my home and my prison will soon cease to exist, reduced to constituent elements and recycled into new vessels. I find I have mixed feelings about this. Part of me wants the ship to remain, a monument to those who died and those who survived. But another part recognizes that permanence is an illusion, that all things eventually dissolve back into their components. The ship served its purpose. Now it will serve a different purpose, its metal reborn as bulkheads and hull plating in ships not yet constructed. Perhaps there is a metaphor in that transformation. Perhaps I too am being recycled, transformed from the officer I was into something different but still useful. The original Kirill Voss died in that sealed compartment. What emerged was a different version, scarred and changed and fundamentally altered, but still capable of service. I dream less frequently now. When the dreams come, they are less visceral, more abstract. I am in darkness, yes, but I am no longer trapped. I can leave if I choose, step through doorways that were previously sealed. This, I think, represents progress, not the elimination of trauma but the development of psychological tools for managing it. I have written this account over the course of many months, revisiting it repeatedly, refining the details, trying to capture with precision what it means to be sealed in darkness, isolated from all human contact, facing death slowly and alone. I do not know if I have succeeded. Language feels inadequate to the task, words too clean and orderly to convey the chaos of lived experience. But I have tried. This testimony exists, will survive me, will perhaps help others understand what they or their comrades might face in extreme circumstances. That is all I can offer. My truth, imperfect and incomplete, a single perspective on suffering and survival. To those who may read this, if you find yourself sealed in darkness, isolated and afraid, know that others have walked that path before you. Know that the human mind is both fragile and resilient, capable of breaking and enduring simultaneously. Know that survival is possible even when it seems impossible, that rescue may come even when hope is lost, that you are not as alone as you feel in your darkest moments. The Emperor may or may not be watching over you. The universe may or may not care about your suffering. But you matter to yourself and you matter to those who will search for you, who will not abandon hope even when reason suggests they should. Endure. Breathe. Exist for one more moment, then another, then another. String enough moments together, and they become hours, days, months. String enough of those together, and they become survival. And if you do not survive, if the darkness claims you despite your best efforts, know that your struggle still has meaning. Someone will remember you. Someone will tell your story. Someone will learn from what you endured, will face their own darkness with greater understanding because you walked this path first. That is all any of us can hope for. To matter, to be remembered, to leave some small mark on the universe that proves we were here, that we struggled, that we tried. My name is Decanus Kirill Voss. I was sealed in darkness for 147 days. I survived, though not unchanged. This is my testimony, my witness, my attempt to transform private suffering into shared knowledge. May the Emperor, if he exists, if he watches, grant you strength in your own darkness. And if he does not, may you find the strength within yourself. For in the end, that may be all we truly have.